Welcome back to Cooking from Scratch. It's Melissa, and for today's cooking video, I thought we'd do an interesting take on something that's been getting quite a bit of press lately. Now, as many of you have seen on Twitter, and some of you haven't, Burger King has decided to come out with their own version of the Happy Meal, the anti-Happy Meal, or basically the meal for whatever mood that you're in. Now, I know this has been getting a lot of bad press lately because of the whole tie-in with mental health, and there's been a lot of feedback from people, and I agree, that no one should try to profit off of mental health. And honestly, had they not gone that route, they would have been just fine by releasing the anti-Happy Meal. It would have been amazing. People would have eaten it up. Pun not intended. The marketing part of it aside, I took a look at some of these anti-Happy Meals and thought to myself, what if the meal itself really represented what these boxes are supposed to be? So of course, it should come as no surprise as what my favorite one would be, the DGAF. Now, of course, for a box that's lovely and dark and black, we have to go with something that's really gonna kick you in the teeth. So we're gonna be making our own version of what that meal would look like. So grab yourself a drink, crank up that music, and let's get cooking. So to get us started on our own version of the anti-Happy Meal, what you're gonna need is now, I don't know about you guys, but personally, when it comes to French fries versus onion rings, I'm an onion rings kind of gal. However, they're not going to be your boring, basic onion rings that you get through practically every drive-thru. No, we're going to crank this one up a little bit. So first off, you're going to need basically any kind of yellow onion. For this one, I am going with one that's called Vidalia onions or Vidalia onions. I never really learned how to pronounce that. And these are going to be a little bit of a sweeter variety of onion. And the reason why I'm going with that is because the spices that we're going to add to it, a little spicy. So we want to go with that sweet, spicy combo. So you want to take your onions, and we're going to want to cut them into rings. Now that we've taken off that outer layer of the onion, we're going to want to cut these about 1/2 inch, because we want these to be able to hold up when we fry them. Just cut straight down. And then once you do that, you're just gonna pop out those layers. Now the very innermost, you can toss these because these are going to get a little gummy because they're so tight in diameter that they're really not worth it. Now that we have our onion rings, we're going to want to give this a good 30-minute bath in some buttermilk. We're going to want to give this a couple of stirs during that 30 minutes. If it's not enough to cover, give it a few more stirs during the 30 minutes. Now, while that's sitting in its bath, let's turn our focus onto the hamburger. Now, this isn't going to be a super gourmet hamburger. We're going to want to make this a little bit simple, but still a little bit spectacular. Basically, if a fast food chain wanted to level up their hamburgers, it's little tips and tricks that they might employ. Or if you want to level up your own at home, you can use it there too. So the first thing we have to address, one of the biggest problems I find with almost every hamburger I eat, is the sad, sorry state of the buns. Now, it does not matter what type of bread you make the buns out of. The worst thing, the criminal act, is that this isn't toasted. I can't even begin to tell you how much this bothers me for many different reasons. One, if you are a mayo fan, how many times have you bitten into a very, very soggy bun? It ruins the whole experience. All they have to do, and very few places do this, toast the buns. They don't even have to toast the top part, just toast the bottom. For us, how we're going to do it is we're going to put a pan on medium heat, put some butter down in the pan, and basically just press the bun into the pan until the bottom is nice and toasted brown. Now for the condiments. Whether you're a ketchup person, whether you're a mustard person, whether you're a mayo person, there is a way to have your cake and eat it too. So if you are tired of your boring, basic ketchup, here's how you can take it and make it even better. By basically not using ketchup. I'm sure you guys have seen a whole new array of a bunch of different sauces where it's some kind of sauce and mayo coming together. But one that I haven't seen in stores, and tell me if you guys have seen it, is the wonderful marriage of sriracha and mayo. Now you'll notice I'm not actually using traditional mayo for this because I'm a little strange. I don't like mayo, but I like aioli. And those of you guys who are cuisine fanatics I know are screaming at your TV or your phone saying it's basically the same thing. And you're right. But for me, aioli has more flavor. Aioli doesn't taste like lukewarm egg. So that's why I'm using it in this one. Now, if you love mayo, please use mayo. Although, if you've never tried it, I recommend going the aioli route. For this one, I'm using a lemon herb aioli just to give it a little bit more acidity. So we are gonna mix equal parts sriracha and mayo, and that's gonna be our sauce. Now, if you don't like yours extra spicy, you may wanna go a little bit more mayo than sriracha. And give it a whisk. Little spicy, little creamy, little herby. And this is gonna taste fantastic on our hamburger. So now for the critical part, the meat. Now for this, I like to go fairly simple. I don't want to doctor this up too much because I really just want to enjoy the flavor of the beef, which gets lost in a whole lot of hamburgers because it gets buried under condiments or a whole bunch of seasoning. So for what we're gonna do for this one is we're basically just gonna add a couple of additions that are just gonna amp up that beefy flavor for us in the form of smoked salt and finely ground mushrooms. This little baby here is my secret to any type of beef, be it meatloaf, meatballs, anywhere you use beef, add a little bit of this and it's going to knock your socks off. And the reason for that is mushrooms are very rich in a little something that we like to call umami, which I know it's the latest sense we never thought we had. It sounds like hocus pocus, but it's true. And basically it has, if memory serves, monosodium glutamate, which basically gives that savory flavor without a lot of salt. So we're gonna take our dried mushrooms, add them to our grinder, and basically turn it into a powdered seasoning and pulse till it's coarsely ground. Now, if your grinder does a horrible job like mine does, just throw in a little bit of extra and you can always sieve out the bigger pieces. We just want a couple of pinches. We don't want our hamburgers to taste like mushroom. We want them to taste like hamburger, just a little deeper flavor. To help make that happen, we're gonna add in a couple of pinches of hickory smoked salt. Now really, you can use any kind of salt. I like using the smoked salt because then it gives that little bit of extra smokiness, which is wonderful if you don't have the ability to flame broil your burgers. So now let's turn our attention to the meat. So for a standard hamburger, I like to go with a basic 80-20, which basically means 20% of the meat that's in here is pure fat. Now that may sound intimidating, but we actually do need that fat for a couple of reasons. One, it's gonna help keep in some of that moisture. Two, it's gonna help us get a nice, good sear. You can really make hamburgers out of anything if you want to use chicken, if you want to use turkey, if you want to use veal, lamb, basically anything. Just make sure it has a little bit of fat. Now, if you don't happen to have a ground meat with good fat content, you can always add in some chopped up bacon. So with very clean hands, we're gonna drop in our meat, add in a couple pinches of our finely ground mushrooms. Now, if you can't find dried mushrooms, something else I found that works really well is get some dried beef bouillon. It just basically pumps up the flavor of the beef. Then to that, we're gonna add in a little bit of our smoked salt. Not a lot, this stuff is pretty powerful, so only a couple pinches. Now, take the best tools that God gave you and let's mix this together. The goal really isn't to smush so much as it just is to combine that powdered mushroom with the salt and with the meat. Now let's start shaping our patties. I want to get this to about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch size patty. That should give us just enough time to get a good crust on each side without overcooking the meat. Now, a good tip for anyone who's making this at home, if you are not grinding the meat yourself, you do have to cook this to medium well, which is that temperature. But when you're dealing with ground meat, there's a lot of avenues for some very bad pathogens to get into your food. So just as a safety precaution, cook to medium well. All right, so we're gonna shape out our patty. Wanna make sure everything's touching. All right, we're gonna fashion the rest of these and then we're gonna get them ready for the grill. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes. Our onions have been having a lovely bath in some buttermilk. Now we gotta get ready to get them breaded to fry. So in here you're gonna see a mix of about 1 cup of flour with about 1 to 2 tablespoons of a whole bunch of different seasonings. Now you don't have to stick with this, you can mix whatever you like. I went with chili powder, cumin, onion salt, garlic salt, regular salt, pepper, a little bit of mustard powder, and a pinch of cayenne. Well, maybe a couple pinches of cayenne. So we're gonna mix this together to make our seasoned flour. You know you've got a good balance between flour and spices when it doesn't look all pure white. Flour doesn't like to share the stage, culinarily speaking, with anyone. So sometimes you do have to go a little bit heavier on the spices. A separate bowl with a little bit of water. We're gonna crack in 1 egg. And blend that up. It's basically your standard egg wash, but watered down a little bit so it's not as gooey and sticking to itself. Now that we have that, get ready to make a little bit of a mess. We're gonna take out our pieces of onion into the egg wash. Dip them into the flour. Now you can double bread these if you like, which basically means go back to the egg wash, then go back to the flour. And then set them on a sheet pan lined with some cooling racks. The buttermilk in the egg wash is gonna give us basically the glue that we need to keep the flour sticking to the onion. And if we do this right, hopefully we don't have the issue that I'm sure a lot of you guys have run into. I run into it all the time, where you bite into an onion ring and you wind up just pulling out the entire onion. Once you have all of your onion rings breaded, take a non-stick pan, pour in just enough cooking oil to cover, and heat it to about 350 degrees. You want to use a temperature gauge for this. Once they've hit 350 degrees, add in your onion rings. Make sure to flip them till each side is nice and golden brown. And once they're golden brown, you're going to want to remove them, let them sit on a cooling rack, and immediately add salt. If you don't add salt at this time, it's going to be hard for the salt to stick later on. Now, are you ready for the best damn milkshake you've ever had in your life? Coke? Have you met coffee ice cream? Now it sounds odd, but go with me. I am weird. I don't like chocolate, but there's something amazing about the combination of Coke and coffee together that still gives you that nice chocolate hit without being overwhelmingly chocolatey, if that makes sense. Plus, it's super easy to do. Basically, you're gonna need equal parts Coke to equal parts coffee ice cream. You could always use chocolate ice cream. I like the coffee because it just kind of lightens it up a little bit. Into our blender, we pop in our coffee ice cream. Living in the desert, you think you wouldn't have to fight with ice cream. Now this is an old bartender's trick. Pouring it down the side at an angle will hopefully reduce the amount of fizziness coming back at you, meaning we're keeping some of that carbonation in our milkshake. And now that our milkshake is ready, let's do the final assembly. And there you have it, our homemade DGAF meal. Because guess what? When it comes to making hamburgers, we actually do give a f. But thankfully, as we've learned today, it doesn't take much to take an ordinary hamburger and turn it into something extraordinary. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this and you'd like to get more recipes on the weekly, if you want to hit the subscribe button down below to have the videos added to your playlist, that would be awesome. Check us out next week as we try our hand at making mozzarella from scratch. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you, awesome people, in the next video. Cheers!